Here we go. Hi, my name is Stephanie Preston. I'm a psychology and neuroscience professor at the University of Michigan, and I'm really excited to come here to talk to you today about something that has an upside and a downside, but that we should all get to know and understand so we can improve our own capacity to help in the world, about bystander apathy, which is when people fail to be able to show concern or the helping response when another person, a stranger, is in need. Humans are thought of as the moral animal, right? This is just a screenshot of dozens of different books written about humans as this profoundly moral creature capable of empathy, of altruism, of compassion and caring, right? We all know that we have this tremendous capacity to be good and to even be good in situations that don't benefit ourselves. However, there are also striking cases we've all witnessed and sometimes participated in where there's a failure to help. For example, in the bottom corner, there's a high school girl who was bullied so much at her school, and nobody stepped in to intervene or to help her, and she ended up committing suicide. There are cases where we walk by a homeless man who is down on his luck, could even just use a little spare change to make sure he can have a meal that day, but we don't always help. And even sometimes when we have money on us, we're not always there to help. This past year in Syria, the refugees have been trying to escape a war-torn country, and they're having a problem where nations around the world are trying to decide, are we going to let these people in? Are we willing to let them share in our bounty in their time of need? These are cases that we've all witnessed where it's sensible people did fail to help. In my own life, I think of myself as a kind and generous person. I study this for a living. You think if anybody's going to jump in and help, it would be me, right? But even in my own life, there have been times when I failed to help. In one example, in the middle of the night, some drunken college students crashed into a tree in front of my house. I ran outside in my pajamas, trying to be helpful, right? And there was 3 gentlemen scattered around, kind of like confused, and I was helping them and offering water and making sure the police were called. But there was one person who was the driver who was unconscious and slumped over the steering wheel, and I was too scared to intervene to help him. I wasn't sure what was wrong with him. I wasn't sure what to do to help. I was scared I would make it worse, but really I was just scared. And in a case like that, I knew I should do something, but I was too scared, and I did fail to help in that case. This summer, as he mentioned, I was in China, and I was in the subway station when I saw a man arguing with his girlfriend, and he was pulling her forcibly down the stairs by her arm, and you could tell she didn't like it, and she didn't want to go with him, and she was trying to get him to stop, and he wasn't listening. And I knew in that case the right thing to do was to say, "Hey, is she okay? Are you all right?" I don't think she likes that, right? But I'm in a foreign country. I don't know their customs. I'm not sure what's going on. These are 2 people who are obviously in an intimate relationship that I don't know anything about. And I was scared. And I continued to watch, hoping to get help. And I tried to wave at the police, but I didn't intervene, even in a case where I knew what to do. In psychology, we call this bystander apathy. Bystander apathy is when people are witness to an emergency, usually, of a stranger, and they fail to help. This is the most famous case, Kitty Genovese, and more people might know about it now because there's a new movie that came out about it called Witness that you can watch. It's a really interesting kind of documentary movie looking back at the case with her brother making the movie. In this example, Kitty was stabbed outside of her apartment building, and many neighbors heard the screams. They knew there was something wrong, but they didn't go and help, right? And in this particular circumstance, she really could have benefited from somebody intervening because at one point, the criminal left the scene and then later came back and killed her. So she could have used help in that situation, and some people did call the police. But it was striking, and it was a moment in our collective history where we knew we don't always do the right thing. There have actually been dozens and dozens of studies at this point on bystander apathy, originating from this earlier period in the 1950s and 60s. And they have figured out when do people intervene and when do they not intervene. Most of the studies show that the more bystanders are present, the more people are in the environment, the less likely you are to respond, which can sometimes seem surprising, especially if those people are strangers, they're not familiar to you, they might not be the same gender as you, then people are less likely to respond. They also don't respond in an adaptive way, I believe, when there's danger, uncertainty, when it requires medical expertise that they lack. Basically, when people feel scared and uncertain and they're not sure what to do, they don't respond, which in some cases might be adaptive, right? You don't want the person who can't swim jumping into the river to help the person who's drowning, right? You don't want the person who's not strong enough to lift somebody to jump into the train tracks to carry somebody out. So these are adaptive responses, I believe. But basically, if you flip those, you can figure out when people do help. When they have expertise and competence, they know what to do to respond. Maybe they feel a little more bold than their people around them. They're familiar to the people around them. They feel more comfortable responding. They've even found that the motor cortex in your brain decreases in response with the number of people present. So when you go from no witnesses to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, your motor system in your brain actually responds less and less and less, showing that it's not just a cognition that you have, like, oh, I'm making a rational calculation about whether it's right to intervene. Your actual body reduces the preparatory response. But there are times when people do courageous, heroic things to save other people, even sometimes in dangerous situations. Well, how is this? How is it that sometimes we do rush towards somebody in need? This is a little off here, but in my research, we study this perspective about active responding based on the evolution of caring for your own offspring. So when you have a helpless baby, mammal babies are infamous, let's say, for needing to be cared for a very long period of time. Whereas in some species, the offspring are born and they're maybe capable of walking and ambulating or flying or moving about. In mammals, they take a long time of protection and care before they're independent. So there are built-in mechanisms across mammals, in rodents and monkeys, in apes, in humans, to respond to these neonates in immediate need. There's a famous experiment, in my mind, from 1969, where they had rodent mothers, and they just kept putting newborn pups, not even related ones to her, into an empty chamber. And if you can see the time course, they spent 3 hours running back and forth, retrieving the helpless pups and bringing them back to the nest. And then they'd run back and get another one, bring it back to the nest. They did it for 3 straight hours. The experimenters got tired, stopped the experiment, right? So it's this very strong, powerful drive to respond to helpless need. There are even known neural systems for this process developed in the rodent animal model of caring for offspring, and we know that these areas participate in humans even when they just see pictures of neonates or babies in the fMRI scanner. So based on this hypothesis, you know when people do feel compelled to respond. When the target or the person in need is vulnerable, like a neonate is or a baby, when they're in distress, when they need immediate help. It's not abstract, it's not tomorrow, they don't live many states away, they're here right now in distress. Especially when the response you have to give is clear and viable. You know what to do, you know you can do it, right? Your motor system is very good at predicting. When we did the clap, even if we didn't see the hands pass, right, your brain predicted for you when they're going to pass. Right? So your brain and your body are very adept at doing this prediction and activating the motor system. And that, of course, reduces the fear and uncertainty when you know what to do. In our own lab, we have supported this hypothesis. We did an experiment where we gave people dozens and dozens of examples of charities that needed money as donations. And the people had their own money that they were earning during the experiment, And we find that people donate more money in this pink region when the victim is a child or a baby than when it's an adult, regardless of the level of risk or survival involved. They also give more when it's a more immediate response, not an abstract one. And they give more when it seems like a more heroic act is required than when it's a nurturing act. And we did this in the fMRI brain scanner, where we scan people's brain activity when they're making these decisions about who they want to donate their money to. And we find, similar to the study I showed you earlier, that these are motor regions above the cingulate cortex, kind of in the middle of your brain. These areas are active to the degree that you give more money to babies and children needing immediate help, and especially if it's nurturant. So not only are these brain areas in the motor preparation system more active in the moment, the actual gray matter, the number of neurons in this brain area, are more dense for people who show this response to a greater degree. So it's not just in the moment more neurons are activated, it's also people who have more neurons in these motor preparatory regions show the response more. So we believe that there's a strong component of this evolved system to actively respond in these conditions that are adaptive in evolutionary history. So in summary, bystander apathy has been described as the most unfortunate part of human behavior, right? But in some ways it's adaptive, right? It's adaptive to avoid endangering yourself, but you can be more likely to respond if you think about what is the necessary response and what can I do in the moment that I know I'm capable of and I feel comfortable with. And in our daily lives, sometimes it's the smallest thing. It's saying, hey, that wasn't a very nice thing to say to her, right? Or, hey, let's give that kid a break. I think he's had enough today, right? Or, hey, I think you're looking really nice today, to somebody who you know could use a little pick-me-up. So those are things that aren't dangerous, and you can plan in advance ways to say these phrases to people in need, and all of us can be heroes as long as we focus on these kind of moments of competency that we can even practice in advance. Thanks for your time.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.